Hey everyone, welcome back. This is James Wilson with MTB Strength Training Systems and BikeJames.com. And today I want to share some of the lessons that I learned while working with Aaron Gwin. A lot of people may not remember, it's been quite a while, but I was Aaron's original strength and conditioning coach when he got into mountain biking. And it was definitely one of the best experiences of my coaching career, getting to work with him at the beginning of his career. Basically, what happened was there's a guy named Rich Hausman who's an old school racer from the Norba days, right? That dates him right there, back when Norba actually used to exist. And he was a four-cross dual slalom racer. And I had the chance to work with him towards the end of his career. I think during the last year of his competitive career, I got hooked up with him, went out and worked with him doing some of the mountain bike specific stuff that I'd been working on. And so I think Rich actually won a national championship that last year. But he knew that I was specialized in mountain bike strength and conditioning. And of course, this is back in the mid 2000s when there was no such thing as mountain bike strength and conditioning. Like no one was specializing in mountain bike strength and conditioning. And so, what Rich was there when Aaron showed up at the Fontana downhill race. That's a local race series in Southern California. But during the off season, a lot of top riders go to Southern California to train. And so you would have a lot of top World Cup downhill racers in these races just as part of their off-season training. And so Aaron showed up to one of these races, and I think he finished top three, got third or something like that. And so again, he's racing against some of the best guys in the world. So it's obvious that this kid's got some talent. And so Rich, took him under his wing, I guess you can say, quote unquote, discovered him and said, "Hey kid, you're going places. I'm just getting done with my career. I know the ropes. I can help you navigate these things and get your career started." And so him and Rich started working together. And one of the first things that Rich did was give me a call. I still remember being at the gym and getting a call from Rich saying like, "Hey man, you got to start working with this kid. He's, showed up, got third at this race. He's a great talent." A lot of people don't realize that Aaron actually spent several years as an amateur motocross rider. So he didn't just, show up and never having thrown his leg over any sort of bike before, but he had literally just started riding mountain bikes. So he had a background racing motocross that transferred over very well to mountain biking, obviously, but still to be able to, just start racing, riding mountain bikes and show up at a race like that and do really well, obviously super talented, right? Some things going in the right direction. And so Aaron was working with someone for his strength and conditioning, but it was pretty typical for what you would find at that time, which is it was just road riding, right? It was a lot of road riding influenced training that didn't have a whole lot of transfer to downhill racing. And so Rich wanted Aaron to get hooked up with someone who was better at training for the specifics of mountain biking, and that's where I came in. So I, called Aaron up, and we chatted for a bit, and I sent him a program. The dumbbell combos program was actually the very first training program that I sent him. And so he, did that, and we continued to work together. And so we actually worked together for about 3.5 years, going from his time as like basically a nobody, right? Like nobody knew who Aaron Gwin was. He wasn't a sponsored rider. He was, just a completely unknown person when I first started working with him. And he ended up getting sponsored with Yeti. Back when Yeti had a downhill race team before they just ditched all that and just went all in on enduro crap. But anyways, he was there, signed with the Yeti World Cup Team. And through him, I got a chance to work with the Yeti World Cup Team because Aaron was impressed with the stuff that I'd been doing with him. And so when the Yeti World Cup Team started looking for a strength coach, he wanted to make sure that he could continue to work with me. So he put in a good word for me, and I had the opportunity to work with the Yeti World Cup Team as well as him. But anyways, over that time, I, had a chance to train him and see him go, like I said, from an unknown rider to the best American downhill racer in a generation, right? So at that time, the American downhill racing was dead. There was nobody who was anywhere near the top of downhill racing. And so he actually ended up getting 10th in his first World Cup race ever, which is completely unheard of. And I mean, nobody does that. In the time we were working together, I think the highest podium finish that he got was third. Again, first American to podium in forever. And his final year, he placed fifth overall. So again, a top 5 overall finish. And again, all of these things are things that no American downhill racer had done for quite some time. So he literally helped put downhill racing back on the map for Americans. And during that time, I had a chance to observe him and learn some valuable lessons that have helped me with my career, other riders that I've worked with. But I think there's a lot that just average everyday riders can take from what I learned during my time working with him and apply it to their own just training and philosophy for how they prepare to get better. So the first thing that I noticed about Aaron was that he did not make excuses. This was something, I had the chance to work with, quote unquote, several next big things. Guys that were, doing well in the local race scenes and starting to do well on a national level. And, they were supposed to be the next great American downhill racer. And again, starting to gain a reputation that I had as really the only mountain bike strength coach out there. They would kind of gravitate towards me and I would start to work with them. But I noticed that they all made excuses. It was crazy. If I asked them to do something, most of the time there was some excuse like, oh, I don't have the equipment to do that, or I don't want to do that. I remember one in particular, I'd had jump roping as part of his conditioning program, and he'd never done jump roping before. So of course the first time, I don't know about never, right? Like maybe as a kid, but it definitely had not been part of his conditioning program. And so, he did jump rope for the first time, and of course his calves are sore and they hurt, right? And this is the off season, right? Now there's times when your training will interfere with your riding. Like, during the season, you don't want that to be the case, but there are times during the off season when you may do something in training that's going to make you sore and not able to ride as effectively. And so, but this guy was like, man, my calves are sore. I can't ride as effectively. I don't want to do this. And he just kind of stopped doing any of the conditioning stuff that I sent him. And again, it was just, just one excuse after another for why they could not do it. And then I get a hold of Aaron, and Aaron just made no excuses. Like whatever I told him to do, it was just consider it done, right? Like he just found a way to do it. And he never made excuses. He just did what I asked him to do. And again, I'm not saying that the things that I said, we're having him do were, magical or something like that. Like, Aaron would have been successful with, almost anyone, right? Like you get a really talented rider like that, and you can help nudge him in the right direction and make some smart decisions for him. But, obviously you're not going to take someone who's got no talent and then just through your training program turn him into a world beater. That's just not how it works, right? So it takes, talent plus the right training program plus the right environment. Like all these things kind of got to stack up together to create an Aaron Gwin. But, Aaron just did not make excuses. And that was one of the big things that stood out to me, was that, his attitude was if, he believed in his coach, he believed in what the coach was asking him to do. And so he just did it. He didn't make excuses. And, again, this sounds obvious, but, how many people out there just make excuses, right? Like, I don't have the time. I don't have the equipment, this, that, the other. And it's just excuse after excuse after excuse for why they can't do what needs to be done. Right. And, in fact, there's one of the things in the training world that you realize is that most people aren't looking for advice. They're looking for agreement, meaning that they want to come to you and tell you what they think they need to do and what they want to do. And they want to find a coach who will agree with them about, oh, yeah, that's what you need to do. They don't want advice. They don't want someone to say, well, I think that this is actually what you should be doing and this would be a better course of action. They think they do. Right? But then you look at like, well, what happens when you run into someone who's giving you advice? Well, you end up making excuses and you end up not following it. So you don't actually want advice. You just want agreement. You want to do what you want to do and call that what you need to do, rather than actually looking at what do I need to do and find a way to do it, right? So champions find a way. They don't make excuses. And again, this is champions racing, champions in life, champions as, parents or husbands or wives, whatever it is, right? Like if you're going to be a champion at whatever it is that you are going to do, then you can't make excuses. Period, right? You've got to find a way. So champions find a way. They don't make excuses. That was the first thing that I learned from working with him. The second thing that I learned from working with him was to keep your emotions in check, right? Never get too high and never get too low. And this was another thing that struck me in working with him, is that when I would talk to him after a race, you could never get I knew how he finished, right? Like I knew whether he did well, I knew whether he did bad, but you could not tell based on talking to him and just the emotions in his voice and the words that he used, whether he killed it that weekend or he sucked that weekend, right? His highs were never too high and his lows were never too low, and he just kept a pretty even keel with his emotions. And again, I think this is super important for people to understand, right? You're going to have ups and downs. And if you let those ups and downs just completely derail you emotionally, you're never going to get very far. You've got to keep the good times in check and you got to keep the bad times in check. And again, you're going to have, good days and bad days. You're going to have good races and bad races, or good rides and bad rides. And you can feel good about the good ones and you can feel bad about the bad ones, but it's just not letting those emotions go to extremes. And again, this was another thing that I noticed in working with other riders is, man, if they won, it was almost impossible to deal with them because they were just like so high on themselves and like, man, I'm the greatest thing ever. Man, I smashed it last weekend. And then if they did poorly, again, they were almost impossible to deal with because they were so down on themselves and just so emotionally distraught. And I suck. And what am I doing? And man, is this program really, am I doing the right things to head in the right direction? And just start to question everything, right? And so that is not going to lead to consistent long-term results. You've got to maintain a pretty even keel with your emotions, never getting too high, never getting too low, and that will help you out quite a bit. The last thing that I took away from my time with him was basically there's this saying that I got from a strength coach, Ian King, who's a big influence on me, and it's, if you're injured, it doesn't matter how fit you are, right? Keeping someone injury-free is more important than maximizing their performance with their training program. And again, this was a thought experiment that Ian had put out there, is like, what is the number one priority with your training program with an athlete? Is it to increase performance, or is it to minimize injuries, right? Like both can't be most important. You have to have one thing, like, the second thing can be real close, right? It's not saying that the second thing isn't important. They're both important. It's just, what's number one? When you're designing your training program, what is your top priority? Is it to keep this athlete injury free, or is it to maximize their performance? Because the more you try to maximize your performance, the more you're going up against the edge and really trying to push that edge of what they're physically capable of, the more likely you are to go over that edge and start to create injuries. And so that was one of the things. Like Aaron had a shoulder injury from a previous shoulder problems, I guess, from a previous shoulder injury that he had incurred before we started working together. And so the focus for us was on keeping that shoulder injury free and doing what we could to help keep, make it even stronger and more resilient. And so again, there were some things that we would avoid. There were some things that we would not push as hard on, and we would let his shoulder dictate what was, how hard we could push these things and what we could do with them, rather than just trying to, push things as hard as we could all the time. And this, showed up in the fact that he was able to train consistently, and his shoulder got better as we were working together and became more resilient. And so we were able to push harder with the training. But again, that idea of like, hey, my top priority is to keep him injury free. And one of the things that I have noticed just in my time as a coach is that, more great riders have been ruined by a bad training program than average riders have been made into great riders through some overly ambitious, super hard training program, right? So, this is kind of one of the things that coaches have to understand. Like, what is your role as a strength and conditioning coach when you're working with an athlete? And unfortunately, I think a lot of coaches, and I had made this mistake, which is why learning this through Aaron helped made me a better coach, is that, I am not, my main job is not to try to make this guy into a world beater in the gym, right? He's a mountain bike athlete. And so the best thing that he can do is be on his bike, like riding his bike and consistently being able to train with his bike is what is going to make him a world beater. And so me kicking his ass in the gym and making it harder for him to actually spend that time on the bike, and him having to deal with injuries and stuff like that from some of the things that we're doing, like that would set him back. So again, like there's the greatest mountain bike rider in the world we've probably never heard of for several reasons, right? I mean, they may have been born in like some area that just doesn't have mountain biking, right? Like we don't think about that. Like environment plays a big role in what you get exposed to early and what you get into. But the greatest mountain bike racer in the world probably we've never heard of, because he ended up getting hurt during his training program and he wasn't able to display his talents like he could have. And so again, keeping that in mind with your own training program is that if you're hurt, it doesn't matter how fit you are, and you've got to make sure that injury prevention is your top priority rather than maximizing performance. And again, consistency is another one of these things that we don't think about, but that is one of the greatest performance maximizers that you can have, is consistency. And so, if you're training and, again, if we're like, hey man, you got 6 weeks to get this person as fit as you can, and that's it, right? You're never going to work with them again. You're never going to see them again. Then, you may push the ragged edge a little bit harder than if you're trying to work with someone consistently. So again, I worked with Aaron for years. And so the idea was that we wanted to make sure that he was consistent with his training. So if we weren't pushing the maximizing the performance thing quite as hard, but he was able to train injury-free consistently for years, then that's going to add up. And so again, if you've got a rider who is just, he's training hard and his performance is going up, but then he gets hurt, right? And when you get hurt, your performance is in fitness and stuff is going to go down. And then you do it again, right? And it's just this like up and down thing, and you're never able to just consistently be able to train and just have this consistent growth over a long period of time, then you're not going to reach your maximum potential that you could, right? And so making sure that you are keeping that in mind. Consistency is key. Making sure that you stay injury free is super important for that consistency. So that's it. Those are the three big things that I learned in my time with working with Aaron. Again, don't make excuses. Champions don't make excuses. They find ways to get shit done. Okay, you got to keep your emotions in check. You don't want to get too high when things are good. You don't want to get too low when things aren't going good. You got to maintain a pretty even keel. And then you got to focus on staying injury free so that you can be consistent with your training over the long run, as opposed to just trying to focus on how do I, work out as hard as I possibly can every time I go to the gym, and just end up like burning yourself out and creating injuries and things that make it hard to be consistent. So these are all lessons that you can apply to your own training, right? You don't have to be a World Cup racer to benefit from these lessons. These are things that I've tried to instill in my own training, things that I've tried to instill in the mindset and training of riders that I've worked with, whether they're just, weekend warriors or, World Cup professionals. These things are going to help everyone get more out of their training and just be a better rider over the long run. So hopefully you guys have learned something from this that you can take and apply to your own training. Again, you can check me out at bikejames.com. You can find a bunch of the training programs there. Again, I've got the updated version of the dumbbell combos program, which again was the first program that I put Aaron on, that he worked, used for months and months and months to kind of get his base going. It's a great starter if you're new to strength training, you're new to mountain bike specific strength training. That dumbbell combos or dumbbell conditioning program is the best or one of the better ones to start with. I've got a bunch of other programs there, but again, if you want to get a program that'll help you out, be sure to check out bikejames.com. You can sign up for the newsletter there, and just stay up to date with everything that I got coming out to help you be a better rider. So again, hopefully you guys have enjoyed these lessons, and I'll talk to everybody next time.